Well, hey there, YouTube, and welcome to Monday's edition of The Breakfast Club. I'm Got That Funk. I'd like to thank you for joining me. Also wanted to thank Kazoom Fowler for his 3 questions last week and everybody else's responses to them. It's nice to have a bit of a lighthearted discussion once in a while here in The Breakfast Club, and I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I suppose, I'm not going to be giving us a lighthearted topic this time around. I was casting around for something to talk about that we haven't already sort of dug into here on the Breakfast Club over the past sort of nearly 2 years since I've been running this channel. And to my amazement, we haven't talked about climate change. So I thought I would bring that up. Now, there's an international consensus amongst climatologists that climate change is an actual phenomenon that is in the process of happening. It's actually accelerating faster than the models were predicting. And it is a result of, to a large degree, of human activity and the impact that we have had with our emissions on the planet, with the way that we live. And that's not just emissions from, factories and automobiles and other stuff like that. It's also emissions from livestock, because factory farming and the demand for, enough beef to feed the meat-eating population of this planet in fast food restaurants and so on. Creates a lot of methane gas because the cows shit and fart a lot. And that methane gas actually, I think, if I'm right in saying, actually has a higher impact than our automobiles do on the climate. Now, whether you, other hosts, if you accept climate change as a fact, great. Then there's all sorts of different ways that you can take this conversation. If you think that climate change is overstated or a hoax, fine. Let me know why you think that, where your head's at, why you come to that conclusion, and why you don't think the scientists are right, that kind of thing. I don't really know if anybody on the panel is a climate change denier. I have no idea, so I look forward to finding out. Now, for myself, I actually think that climate change is real. I can see the difference in the climate from when I was a kid to how it is now. That's not just, your random odd year of weather here and there. There's been a successive stream of odd weather now, or what I would call uncharacteristically unseasonal weather, just here in the UK, in the time that I've lived here, and I've lived here for 28 years. But if I think back to my native California and what it was like when I was growing up versus what it's like now, again, it seems to me that it's obviously different. Maybe not so significantly so that it wakes you up in the middle of the night thinking, what am I going to do? But that's part of the problem, in my opinion, because climate change is gradual, because people can't see it happening right in front of their face, like turning on a light. They have room to deny it or to mitigate against thinking about how serious it is. But let's talk about how serious it is. If the oceans are rising, which is a result of the glaciers all around the world, which have been in retreat now for decades, huge chunks of Greenland and Antarctica have been breaking off for decades now. And the more ice that melts, and it will raise the ocean levels, and the more oceans raise, the more at-risk people who live along the oceans are. Now, I don't know what the exact figure is, but an awful lot of the human population lives within 20 miles of a coastline, okay? Major population centers like Mumbai, for example, are on the water. Also in America, you've got Miami, New Orleans. In Europe, you've got virtually the whole of the Netherlands and Denmark. I think the highest point in Denmark is like 170 or something like that meters, 174 meters above sea level. So, the low countries, they would take a bashing. Certain island countries would be subsumed. Bangladesh would be in big trouble if the oceans rise. I mean, it already gets a bad enough time flooding there as it is, and then they've got the monsoons to worry about as well. So an awful lot of people who live along coastlines, as the oceans begin to rise and as extreme weather events, which are a facet of climate change, are on their increase and will continue to increase, there's going to be an awful lot of people refugeeing away from coastlines with knock-on effects. There's going to be looting in the places that they leave behind, and widespread devastation from extreme weather events as well. The places where the refugees are going is going to be a bit of an issue. I mean, when there's a natural disaster, like all at once, like a hurricane or an earthquake or a tornado, the outpouring and generosity and hospitality that people show to their neighbors is inspiring, often. But it's also the case sometimes that when these emergency situations come up, people get a bit too covetous of their own stuff, and it doesn't necessarily go the way we would want it to go. The thing is, with climate change, when you start having populations, whole cities moving into the countryside, I think people living in the countryside might not take too kindly to that. And in a country like the United States, where so many people are armed, I see the potential for massive social upheaval as climate change gets worse. Now, I wouldn't like to put a number on how far into the future we're looking at these kinds of migrations of people, but I absolutely believe that these days are coming. And unfortunately, it seems that climate change is accelerating faster than most of the early scientific models were predicting. But with refugees, also is going to come water shortages in the places where they're refugeeing to, food shortages in the places where they're refugeeing to, not to mention the fact that extreme weather events are going to wipe out crops from time to time that we rely on not only to feed ourselves, but to feed the livestock on which we depend. And as long as that kind of thing is in short supply, it has knock-on effects throughout the whole of culture as well. Our entire societies will be adversely affected by climate change, and it seems to me that our political masters are doing precious little to mitigate against it on our behalf. And that's got to change straight away. So that's another thing other hosts can talk about. What steps do we need to take to kick this shit into action? Okay, the Paris Agreement that Obama signed before he left office was better than nothing, but didn't go far enough, because even if we do nothing right now and don't make it any worse, and it only stays as bad as it is right now, the effects of climate change are at this point irreversible. We need to get our emissions back to a place where they were 30 years ago to have any chance of mitigating against climate change. We need to invest in sustainable, renewable sources of energy as much as possible. And we need to do that yesterday, basically. There's no time to lose here. So there's plenty to talk about for other hosts. What should we do to mitigate against climate change as individuals, as a society, as a world? If you don't think climate change is real, talk about that. If you think it's overstated, talk about that. My attitude is, let's just pretend for the sake of argument that climate change is a popular myth that has been ran with for some reason. And it's not necessarily a conspiracy, but it's been overstated, and it's a popular myth, and it turns out not to be happening. Well, you know what? If we invest in renewables and we take precautions against famine and shore up our seaside places so they're less prone to devastation from extreme weather events, basically, if we make the world a better place anyway, and climate change isn't real, what have we lost? I want you to chew on that and let me know what you think. I look forward to a vigorous discussion in the comment section below, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what other hosts bring to the table. The topic is generally climate change. You can take it any direction you want. I'll see you again next week for the wrap-up video, and until then, thanks for watching. May all your ups and downs be ups.